everyone, and welcome to First Gen Gamers, the podcast where my co-host and I take a topic and we don't create a list. We discuss it console by console because we are gaming history nerds.
That's correct.
Yes.
I am Mike, you are Jed, and this is our third episode. Woo!
I don't know why 3 is a milestone, but woo!
I'm going to celebrate every episode, just like I celebrate every day, just like I'm thankful for every day. And that's on theme because today's episode is about Thanksgiving, specifically giving thanks for the moments that made us happy to be gamers and the moments that make us smile when we think about our history in gaming. So that's kind of the through line, I guess, when we discussed on the last episode of what we wanted to do. How did that go for you when you were going back through writing games?
It took a little bit. Like I had to really, especially for the older consoles, I really had to think back. Capture certain memories. But there was a lot of fun to be revisited. There's one thing that I will get into when we get to the third generation, the story that I was telling one of my kids that I will be using here. That was just a fun memory related to gaming.
Great. Yeah, something similar for me. I am sort of concerned that I'm going to forget something, but it is what it is. I think the episode's going to be long enough because there's definitely plenty to talk about. We're two men in our 40s going all the way back to when we started gaming. That's a lot of ground to cover.
Yes.
Oh man.
Legitimately, I think I got my first console. I'm not 100% positive on the year, but I want to say 82.
Oh wow.
So I'm looking at 40, 41, maybe 42 years of gaming.
Well, not to date myself, but I was born in late 82. So it's highly likely you got your first console and I didn't exist yet. Well, right. Maybe I was in my mom's tummy, but one thing I wanted to add as a caveat, you may be listening and thinking like, I've listened to your older shows or past episodes. Why didn't you mention X game? It's not because I didn't play the game or even because I didn't like it. Maybe I didn't play it at launch. Maybe it wasn't a formative memory. I'm going to be pointing out games, good or mediocre that I really like and that affected me, that make me personally thankful. So, while I really enjoy Castlevania, Parasite Eve, Paper Mario, stuff like that, they may not be showing up in today's lists. I think I have a side mission for Castlevania, but for the most part, you know what I mean?
Yep.
And I figured it might be the same for you.
Yes. Definitely not going to be mentioning everything. And I think there are also some games that kind of go without saying, like, right off the top of the head. Super Mario Brothers. Everyone's played it. It's impactful to everyone. I'm sure to mention it. But still, that's not a game that needs 5 minutes of deep exploration.
I don't think so. In fact, there are certain consoles where I just couldn't help but rattle off dozens of games. So when we get to those, I might just rattle the names off and then go back and just pick a few to talk about. That way we're not here all day. Whereas other consoles may only have 1 or 2 games, so they'll get a chance to shine, at least, discussing those. So with that said, go ahead.
Well, I'd like to add one more caveat too. This is at least for me on this episode.
Okay.
One of the ways the way that I approached this was that I wanted to capture the memories at the time. So there are certain consoles that I experienced retroactively.
Okay.
I'm not counting those because I didn't, spoiler, TurboGrafx 16. I didn't play the TurboGrafx 16 when it was released. I didn't play it until the virtual console. So I don't have memories of playing Bonk's Adventure or R-Type or Military Madness as a 12-year-old. I have them in my early 30s. It's not the same thing. So
no, that makes sense.
Yeah. So
that makes total sense.
Yeah. So my memories are 100% contextual of what I experienced at the time I experienced them.
Got it. Mine is similar, but there are some differences. I do go back and talk about games maybe I didn't play at launch, but only if they were really impactful and I have a good story to go along with them. And again, I may rattle off a few here and there that I don't go back over, but if you hear something that you're curious about, feel free to stop and ask. I'll do the same if I hear something I'm curious about that you don't go into detail about. And without further ado, I think we can jump right into it, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Second gen. I mean, other than Pong, we love Pong. Second gen. I didn't have a ton, but I figured, you probably have a little bit more there than me. What happened then?
So second gen was my introduction to video games.
Great.
My parents bought me my first console was the Intellivision. From what I understand, they bought it because I was sinking what seemed like hundreds of dollars of my dad's salary into the arcades, and they thought, get him one at home. Maybe maybe that'll stop him from bleeding us dry quarter by quarter.
Yeah, make an investment.
Yeah, and of course, if you're a parent and if you're a kid of the '80s and your parents bought you a console, the words "developing hand-eye coordination" also probably came into play somewhere.
Sure,
because apparently all of our parents thought we were going to be like eye surgeons or something.
Who knows? I will say that I think that's legit. Like, I can only speak anecdotally. I mean, I've seen studies, but I don't know if there's enough to be conclusive. But I would say that I'm very quick thinking, adept at problem solving in the moment. And I have great hand-eye coordination. You could chalk that up to also growing up in the 80s and being a boy, which means that you played sports. There was no option. You couldn't twirl the baton. No one let you do that. You had to play sports.
Yep.
Unfortunately, whether you wanted to or not. And I dabbled here and there, but I never really stuck to anything except for video games. And you could also blame some of that on the ADHD. I don't know. But I really do think that games helped hone a lot of useful skills I use today. So I would totally buy into that.
Yeah, absolutely. Just maybe not what our parents expected it to be. They were like, he's going to be a rocket engineer. No, I'm not. Not even close.
No.
So as for the Intellivision itself, I really don't have much in the way of specific memories. Like I was 4 or 5, somewhere around there when I got it.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I remember playing it. I remember loving it. I remember 1983, I believe. It was either 83 or the Christmas of 82, somewhere in there. My parents decided that I was due for an upgrade. I don't know why they decided it, but I'm not ungrateful. They decided to get me a new console, the Atari 5200, keeping the run and going of my parents picking consoles that were doomed.
Oh, no.
Yeah. But I have a lot of fond memories of the Atari 5200. 4 games in specific. Jungle Hunt, which is that game that was primarily just timing your jump from swinging rope to swinging rope.
Okay.
I was never good at it, but I loved it.
Yeah, Pitfall did that too, right?
Pitfall did it to a limited extent. This was like if Jungle Hunt took that moment of Pitfall and just made it a whole damn game.
Oh, no.
Yeah. It was just...
I wasn't good at that either. I was terrible at Pitfall. Like, every time I saw an alligator, I was like, well, it's game over today.
Yep. Joust and Dig Dug were both huge favorites.
God, I love Dig Dug. Yeah.
For some reason, with both games, I had it in my head that if you got to level 100, that you beat the game. It's the type of thing that only a 6-year-old could come up with. Not based in reality at all, just fantasy. But
I don't know. It sounds legit to me. I mean, because those games weren't designed to end. So if you have to make your own kind of headcanon about what you feel like feels complete to you, I think that's entirely appropriate.
Yeah. And so I practiced those games relentlessly, and I managed to get to level 100 on both of them. And I was extremely irritated when I found out that it did not stop.
Oh, no.
I had built this fantasy up in my head like it was 100% real. And the minute I found out there was a level 101, I was like, I'm done. Forget it.
By the way, there's no Santa Claus.
Son of a bitch.
All on the same day. Oh, rough. My first experience with Dig Dug was actually the NES, and loved the mechanic of taking your little air pump, stabbing it into an enemy, and just till it blows up. I thought that was the funniest thing.
Oh yeah,
love that.
But the game that I wanted most, the game that I did get it, and it was probably the game that I played the most, and it is the first video game that I ever played in arcades, Moon Patrol. I just adore Moon Patrol. There's an arcade not too far from my house. It's a retro arcade. It's one of the few places on Earth that has a working version of Atari's Hercules pinball game. Which if you've never seen it, it is a like pinball machine that's about 4 feet wide and about 9 feet long. They decided to make this supersized pinball machine. It uses a ball that's the size of a tennis ball. But it's empty like a ping pong ball. So it's weightless, which makes the game play really sluggish. But anyway, they have Moon Patrol, and I took my boys there a couple months ago, and it was the first time we'd been there, and I saw Moon Patrol, and my heart just started fluttering like, oh my God, I'm 5 again. I've got to play this again. And it's a simple game. If you haven't played it, you're supposed to be like a lunar exploration vehicle, although it looks more like Grimace's turd.
Right.
Because it's purple. There's a little gun that shoots out the front. There's a little gun that shoots out the top. It's an auto scroller. You shoot rocks. You jump over pits. That's it. It's an arcade game. High score. I can't explain why I love it to death. I just do. And when I got that on 5200, at the time, it was the greatest day of my life.
Awesome. All right. Well, hopefully my phone notification didn't just interrupt that. I was like, whoa, I forgot to turn turn your cell phones off, folks, when you record. Yep. Yeah. I mean, for me, I am old enough to remember begging my parents for quarters for sure. Cause that lasted a while, but I did it in the 80s too. And for that generation, I definitely was solely on arcades. I mean, I knew people who had Ataris and I would play them occasionally, but it didn't really stick with me the way that, going to a pizza parlor and playing a tabletop version of Pac-Man would. There was a Q*bert in the local Dairy Queen. I hated Q*bert so much. I could never figure out like how to get him to move where I wanted him to move. And we were just like both just cursing every time I played that game. And then I'm trying to think. Pinball machines were big too, definitely. I think they were dying down by the time, I started making memories because they were huge in the 70s, weren't they?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
And one of a friend of my mom's, he had a pinball machine. So whenever we visited him, I would always play that. And as a grown up, I'm like 100. I'm like 90% sure he did cocaine off of that pinball machine. But it was good times, and I thought it was really neat, and I have an affinity for pinball that persists to this day because of how much I played it as a kid. So really, really thankful for pinball, really, really thankful for Pac-Man. And that kind of wraps up. Now, I'm not enraptured yet. I'm not, quote unquote, a gamer. That doesn't happen until the 3rd generation, but I'm gamer curious at this point. So
fair enough.
Yeah.
One more thing that I want to mention about the 2nd gen for experiences was my first experience with a game company being a bit of a bullshitter. Not giving 100% what was advertised.
Disillusionment.
That would be the Atari 2600 adapter for the 5200. It was this god-awful device that was as wide as the 5200 for... I don't know why, but it plugged into the cartridge slot, and it was huge. Like I said, it was as wide as the console itself, and it was about like 9 inches tall. And then you put the 2600 cart into it. The problem was there were several hardware revisions of the 5200 over its very short lifespan. Mm-hmm. And so the adapter was only compatible with later models. I had, I believe, a launch model or one of the pre-compatible models. And my parents didn't know that. I don't know how much the adapter was, but I know that they ended up having to take my console and get it hardware modded for like $100, so that way it would work with the adapter.
Yikes!
So it was that awesome. I can play even more games. Plug it in, Dad. It's not working, and then finding out Atari. I don't want to say they weren't forthcoming about it, but the Sunburst sticker on the box that said compatible with some 5200 models was, about the size of a quarter, the bottom lower right corner.
Very small.
Didn't list which models, just said some.
Just said, good luck, asshole.
Yeah.
Oh, my gosh.
Fuck you, Atari. Fuck you very much.
You know what, though? One thing to be grateful for, to spin that into a positive, your parents were supporting your gaming habit monetarily, and you guys had the means to spend $100 80s money on fixing a thing you already bought that didn't work, that probably cost more than that. So
probably.
That's a real blessing. I grew up pretty poor. I don't think I had that kind of money to throw down on my hobby until I was already like out on my own. So, you can still game on a budget for sure. And I very much value the lessons and the tricks that I learned to get by as a younger person. But that is really awesome. I'm really happy for you that your parents were supportive from jump, and they went so far as to like fix something for you rather than go, I don't know what to tell you. You know what I mean? Or take it back to the store. That's cool.
Yeah. So with that, let's get into the third generation.
Let's do it.
The generation, all of us, every one of us at this age. If we didn't start here, this was the generation that just it exploded.
Yeah, this is definitely the snowball that started to roll downhill to become the behemoth that is the gaming industry. 100%. The rise of Nintendo started here. The Nintendo that is still going strong today. So with that, Nintendo, I wrote down a number of games. I'm just going to quickly rattle them off. You let me know if I missed any that you wrote down. We can talk about them. So I wrote River City Ransom, Super Mario Brothers, Duck Hunt, Legend of Zelda, Dr. Mario, Punch-Out, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2, the arcade port, not the first one. That was terrible. Double Dragon, and DuckTales. Woo.
Ooh, DuckTales. Nice. Woo.
Those are the ones that really stood out to me. Any ones that you would make mention in that generation?
Yes. Let's see. I accidentally scrolled on my notes. Let's see. Clash of Demon Head.
Ooh, good one.
I know this game is basic as hell, but Kung Fu, I absolutely love it.
Okay.
I am a big supporter of Zelda 2, but both Zeldas. Dragon Warrior, my very first RPG.
Nice.
A very underrated game, I think, Willow.
Okay.
It's kind of an action RPG. And Faxanadu, which was it kind of lived halfway in between an RPG and a Metroidvania.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember watching a video that Metal Jesus did on Faxanadu. That's like the first time I ever heard of it, because he likes to do, slightly obscure or hidden gems, so to speak. So those are great ones. I mean, a lot of mine are going to be obvious, but I'll pull a few out. I mean, Duck Hunt, I think, really started my love for light gun games that persists to this day. And I'm super geeked about the fact that we have the technology to do light gun games on HDMI. It's a little pricey right now, so I'm waiting for that to kind of become more reasonable, because I don't want to spend console prices just to get functionality for my HDMI, especially when I have a perfectly fully functional CRT and PS2 gun cons over here in the other room. So I'll be waiting on that. But no, Duck Hunt was really cool. I love the idea of being able to shoot at the screen to hit the ducks, even if I wasn't super good at it. And that asshole dog kept laughing at me.
Fuck that dog, man.
Right? Fuck that dog.
I never got a chance to play it, but there was one of the more recent. It was either the Switch Smash Brothers or the one on Wii U finally put the dog in the game.
Yeah, Duck Hunt. That's right. Or Duck Hunt Duo if you're English.
And I was like, I need to play that game just so that way I could beat the shit out of that stupid dog.
Yeah, mollywop his ass. But yeah, no, he sucked. Super Mario Brothers was great. Definitely, for all the reasons we all know. Yep. Legend of Zelda, same thing. Legend of Zelda really spoke to me because it was the first time a soundtrack really just got under my skin. Like it's so impressive. The compositions that were made with such limited tool sets back then and how beautiful and robust they remain to this day, how enduring they are. Mm-hmm. I don't think people truly realize like a lot of the video game music that came out of that era that persists, that people have built upon. It's amazing.
Oh yeah. You could easily build a Spotify playlist of classic 8-bit NES tunes that just are just legit bangers, whether it's Zelda, Mario, Mega Man 2's soundtrack is just sublime.
And it can translate straight to a symphonic, you know what I mean? And sound like gorgeous, like it was written for it. You know what I mean? Like good stuff. Let's see. River City Ransom I want to mention too, because that was my first brush with RPG elements. Now, I didn't really get into the traditional turn-based RPG until the following generation. And even then, it was kind of a contentious road. So we'll get to that. But with River City Ransom, I already really like beat 'em ups. And I think that River City Ransom was probably my introduction to that. But of course, adjacent to that, we had the Turtles, we had Double Dragon, right? But with River City Ransom, it just had so much personality and a lot of that Japanese quirk that we all know and love, but maybe didn't get a whole lot of stateside, like your Clash of Demon Head, right?
Right.
And the fact that you could get money from defeating enemies and then use that to purchase items that would increase your stats or teach you special moves, to me, that added such a depth of replay value. Because in my mind, before River City Ransom, even with Legend of Zelda, because you could save it, it was games are linear. You start here, you run to the right, you finish, usually in a day. Or if it's really hard, you just keep practicing until you can finish it in a day. And with Legend of Zelda, yeah, that is more adventure-like. And again, that's why it stands out in my head too, but for a different reason. But with that, there was still an A to B aspect to it. You get this item, you go here, you finish this dungeon. You get this item, you go here, you finish this dungeon, right? But with River City Ransom, I felt open-ended. Like you could customize your character. You can lean into different stats, try different moves out, figure out what works for you. And for me, that just opened up a whole slew of possibilities in my mind of what gaming can be. And I'm super grateful that I had a chance to play that in its hey. So Punch-Out's awesome. DuckTales, the music, what can I say? And that started like what I would come to know and love as a slew of like really quality licensed games from Disney properties. And you think of Chip and Dale in that generation as well, like good stuff. So,
I mean, good enough that Capcom did an entire re-release of all of their Disney platformers a few years back.
Hell yeah. And I mean, more recently, there's a few others coming out that are going to come up in the next generation when we discuss it. But that would be it for my third gen. I mean, in this generation, I did eventually get a Nintendo. It was late in the generation's life, so late that I eventually traded my Nintendo for a Sega Genesis. And I had a handful of games that I played, a number of years, but this is where I was like, yeah, this is what I want to do, like all the time. This is my thing. This is my hobby. So the Nintendo really is, the NES specifically is the console that got me into gaming and made me officially like identify as someone who wants to play games on the reg. So.
All right. For me, so one game I forgot to mention when I was rattling a few off. Mm-hmm. And this will start off my memories. Ninja Gaiden.
Yeah, it's good.
So story heavy. Every game, games before that had stories, but they were window dressing. Super Mario Brothers story is Koopa's kidnapped the princess and she keeps being in another damned castle. But it was just window dressing because you were, as you said, A to B. Zelda's story was very paper thin. It was just enough to get the game going.
It was Rescue the Princess. All of them were Rescue the Princess. Double Dragon was Rescue Your Girlfriend. River City Ransom was Rescue Your Girlfriend. That's all they had.
Right. Just women getting kidnapped in every dimension.
Just getting damseled.
But Ninja Gaiden had a deeper story. It had lore, and it had those breathtaking cutscenes.
Cutscenes were great. Yeah.
Like way, way better than than you would think that the NES could pull off. Mm-hmm. And the game is hard as balls.
Is it?
I played that game for a year, and I finally managed to beat it. And I remember beating it. My dad was into the game. I mean, he played it a little bit, but he just liked watching it because he was very into karate and kung fu movies. So he would sit there and watch it, and he saw me beat it. And I remember I beat it, and we both kind of went, ah.
That's cool.
And I don't think I played the game for like another year because it was, okay, I've dedicated my life to this thing.
Yeah.
I'm setting it aside now.
It's time to take a rest.
but that game really showed me how much story can be a part. The games weren't just high scores or rescue the princess anymore. That these things could be almost like movies in and of themselves.
Maybe that's what gave this generation legs, I mean, not that there weren't narratives before, but you're right. I feel like a lot of people were starting to discover the real true capacity for storytelling and experiences that you could get with gaming in this generation.
Yeah.
Thanks in large part to Nintendo. Shout out to Sega Master System as well. But, either one, one of them had to be popular. And yeah, they just, man. We could talk all day about the NES, but I definitely share the experience that you have, obviously, at different games. Hey, shout out, by the way, sidebar, Ninja Gaiden, the world record holder for the speedrun in Ninja Gaiden, Retro Runner, a good buddy of ours, a friend of my previous show. We've had him on a couple times. I actually talked to him recently because in the wild, my old co-host with Co-Most, Full Metal Merc, he found a ROM hack complete in an NES cartridge and everything of Ninja Gaiden that was retooled to be a Deadpool game. Amazing. We actually just sold it at an expo yesterday. And the guy was super geeked. He was like a huge fan of Ninja Gaiden. So when we told him what it was, he was like, oh my God, he bought it immediately. So he loved Deadpool as well. So that, you love to make a dream come true. But Ninja Gaiden has a special place in my heart, specifically for all the reasons you said, and because a good friend of mine is really good at it and speed runs it, and it's got a lot of good memories tied to it. So,
yeah. Let's see. I want to say just on Zelda 2. Yeah. I mean, for all the reasons that you said, Zelda, fantastic game. It's an absolute classic. I know that Zelda 2 is the 2D black sheep. That being said, I think its black sheep status is a little unfair. I agree. People go, it broke the formula. It didn't. There wasn't a Zelda formula yet, people. Yeah. Zelda had one singular Uno game before this.
That doesn't matter, Jed.
Yeah,
you got to give the people more of what they want. You don't get to change things up on them. Come on, we fear change.
Right.
I do too. I have to admit,
I love the change.
In its hey, I hated it. And I think for me, it was because it's not that it was unapproachable, but it was more difficult. I think we can admit that.
Yes.
And I think because you're going in expecting one experience, not only are you getting another experience, but you have to approach it a whole new way if you want to be successful. And for a young child, that's a lot to ask.
Yeah.
So for me at the time, I was like, F this game. Going back and seeing it from an adult's perspective and with eyes having gone through other similar changes in gaming, I 100% respect it. And I love some of, if there's a straight line from Legend of Zelda to Breath of the Wild, there's a straight line from Zelda 2 to Ocarina of Time.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Just with like the sword play and the shield and everything. I mean, there's a lot of similarities when you actually break it down to brass tacks.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and I don't think it does not get the respect it deserves. Flaws and all, I think it still is a pretty damn good Zelda game.
Yeah.
And I will also say the same for the occasionally maligned Super Mario Brothers 2. again, one of those games where people go, it broke a formula that only existed for one game at the time. I enjoy it. It's honestly probably it's not my favorite Super Mario Brothers, but it is my comfort Super Mario Brothers game. It's the one that I can go back to, and if I just want a game where I can blow through it mindlessly, that's my Mario game.
One of the more popular instances, too, of a thing where game already made, switch sprites, make new game. Because it was originally, what was it called? Doki Doki Panic or something? I can't remember what it was called.
Yeah, it was Doki Doki Panic.
And so a lot of the things that became like in the 80s Mario Brothers show and a lot of staples like Birdo and other characters never would have existed if they did just go straight from Mario Brothers 1 to the Japanese Mario Brothers 2, which is just Mario Brothers 1, but troll the shit out of you. And then, straight to Mario Brothers 3, right? But they were able to not only glob on to this new identity and clean it up and make it, in the spirit of Mario, but like that it endured, you know what I mean? It's part of the Mario canon. And that's a really cool success story, because it feels icky when you say it without any context, like a game already made, just reskin it to be a popular game, or like slap an IP on there. There are a lot of, I would say, franchises that are horribly mishandled, Konami, that they take their IPs and just hand them to anybody. And you can tell if they already had a game in mind and they just slap the famous IP logo on it and call it a day, right?
Yep.
But that's not what happened here. This was done with love and care and consideration, and that's the result that you get.
Yep. Two things related to gaming that I wanted to touch on, but not strictly about a game. One was the memory that I teased a little bit ago. Going to Toys R Us, going to that wall where they didn't have games in boxes. So if you're a younger listener, just imagine this. Instead of the games in boxes, there's these little flaps, these little plastic flaps. And inside the flap, there's a card that's the front cover of the box. And you lift the flap up because it's on a horizontal hinge. So you lift it up, and on the back of it is the back of the box. If you want the game, you take a paper slip. And you take that paper slip up to the front, and you pay for it. And right next to the door, the exit door, is this small caged area. And you would exchange the paper slip for the game. So if you wanted DuckTales or Zelda or whatever, you'd find it on the wall, and it's all in alphabetical order. And you take the paper slip and you just go through that process. I loved that process. I loved the idea of the games being so high security that they're in this locked cage, like like the cash exchange at the casino, and you get the game, and it's like, I did it. I've completed the mission, and I've got the game as a reward.
It made holding a CIB or like a brand new game feel more special, because it's not something you just walk in the store and do without actually making a purchase, right?
Yep.
So yeah, I would agree with that. I didn't get to experience it too much because I didn't really have the money to buy new games literally until the PS1 generation. It took me a bit, but I definitely remember seeing those and just passing them by like, well, can't afford that. But it was a neat concept for sure. And I really appreciate, even though it is neat, I do appreciate that we can just pick up and hold the product now. And it does feel less special, but it's more accessible. You know what I mean? So for people who can't maybe afford to buy games all the time, at least they can look at it, and as far as accessibility is concerned, my goodness, there's a whole sidebar to be had about watching people play games and let's plays and things like that. You know what I mean? Or free play games for that matter. So great stuff.
And the other memory, the last thing I wanted to bring up of this generation, 2 words, Nintendo Power.
Hey, Nintendo Power. That was your magazine of choice, I take it, when you were a kid?
Oh, yeah. Well, for a while. Like, once I discovered EGM and Game Pro, I definitely started picking them up and got a subscription. But for as soon as Nintendo Power launched, I was a subscriber. I just looked forward to, every month getting that magazine. Yeah, sure. Looking back now, Nintendo Power was 100% propaganda. But for a 10-year-old, I don't care about journalistic bias. I just want to see that there's a game, there's a new Castlevania game coming out.
No, it's amazing. And I mean, they had, and this was, again, before the internet and before you could really easily access secrets and guides. They had maps, they had guides, they had tips, they had tricks. And aside from exchanging things on the playground, that's really the only way, or figuring it out yourself, that was really the only way. So for really obscure games like, I don't know, Castlevania 2, if you wanted to figure out what the hell to do, you kind of needed to have a subscription to Nintendo Power or have a friend who had a sub. So, yeah, I think my magazine of choice when I was a child, my first gaming magazine was probably Game Informer when I was an adult. But when I was a child, I read this magazine called Disney Adventures. Do you remember that? It was a smaller mag.
Vaguely.
Yeah. Whenever there's new, like I would go grocery shopping with my mom a lot. We never had a subscription, but whenever I noticed that there was a new episode, by the checkout line, I had my mom buy it for me. And I was like super into that. I probably had like years and years of issues. They're lost to time, unfortunately. But like that was like, I remember the feeling of being a child and reading a magazine targeted at me. So to have that plus it be a gaming magazine must have been like amazing. Oh man, that's so cool. All right, well let's get on down to the fourth generation.
Yes.
I broke some rules. We originally talked about with the concept of this show that we were not going to talk about mobile platforms. I feel like there's room to discuss mobile platforms, like Game Boy and Vita and stuff with certain lists. So I got a little bendy, and in the fourth generation, I did bring up Game Boy. Specifically to talk about Tetris, because Tetris is on everything, but to me, Tetris will always be inextricably linked to the original big old gray brick Game Boy, right?
Yep, absolutely.
First place I played it, first place I fell in love with it. And I think it was something that, I mean, you want to talk about most important games for generations, like, to piggyback off of our last episode. I noticed I didn't say anything about Tetris, but that's because we didn't talk about the Game Boy. Tetris in the fourth generation, most important. I don't know if there would be a handheld market like we know it today without Tetris. I think that's what really launched its popularity and gave it legs,
Absolutely 100% agree. I mean, to underscore your point, I remember getting a Game Boy for Christmas. Tetris was the pack-in game. I don't know that I got to touch that Game Boy for the first 6 months that I had it for more than like once or twice a week because my parents were arguing over who got to play the damn thing because they wanted to play Tetris.
Which I love. Wasn't it so cool? Because again, when we're younger and gaming wasn't as ubiquitous as it is now, there were two things that were always true. Your parents didn't game and girls didn't game. Now with older people, I mean, it's just kind of old people adopting technology, right? With girls, it's a real damn shame, but I think it's just the bias of the industry and then just early on deciding it was a boy's toy, so it was never really, it was always closed off. It was always hyper targeted and advertised towards boys. Again, we were talking about how all the plots are damseling women. So there wasn't a whole lot for like girls to identify with. And I think that's a damn shame. I love to see it nowadays. Like girls are total gamers and they're into it and they have plenty of options. And I love that for them. I wish they could have been along with us since the beginning. That's what's unfortunate. But man, games like Tetris, hell yeah. Anybody can get into that stuff. Love it. So thankful for Tetris. Thank you, Tetris.
I think it's the only game that my mother ever played, to be honest.
Really?
I do not recall a single time she ever sat in front of my Nintendo or my Sega Genesis or my PlayStation, but she played the living shit. I mean, there is probably a landfill dedicated to the batteries that she ran through just playing Tetris.
Woo! And that Game Boy would kill the batteries, boy. Oh my God. Well, yeah, I'm thankful for Tetris. And then I want to mention one more game, and that's Pokemon Yellow. I don't know if I originally played it on the original Game Boy or if I played it on Game Boy Color, but Pokemon was all the rage back in like 98, right? So this is there's a large time frame in the fourth generation. So bear with me here. My cousin that I was close to and that lived close by, he was like, I think he's like 7 or 8 years younger than me. I don't feel like doing the math right now, but suffice it to say, he was the target demographic for Pokemon. And I was just entering high school at the time. So I was like just too old. And he was obsessed. I mean, he watched the anime and he had the game and he was Pokemon this and Pokemon that. You know what I mean? Everybody's going crazy about it. And it was the cool thing for us older kids to shit on Pokemon, right? Like, oh, that's for babies. And he left his Game Boy at my house when he visited one time and it had, Pokemon Yellow in it. And I was like, well, let's see what the hell this is all about. So I picked it up and started playing and I was like, oh, they give you this little monster you can use to fight with. Oh, wait, you can catch other monsters. Oh, you can raise them up. Oh, you can use them to fight. Oh, this is good. I was hooked from the formula from Jump. I love the adventure of trying to catch and discover the different types of Pokemon. I like the joy of like seeing a new one pop up on screen when you got the random battle. Defeating the gym, defeating the Elite Four, putting together a team that was effective against other teams. Getting a link cable eventually and playing against other kids on the bus. I loved it so much. I bought in and never let go. I've been a Pokehead since. So super thankful for Pokemon Yellow and my cousin. We used it to bond. From that point on, when a new generation came out, he got Silver, I got Gold, or, he got Ruby, I got Sapphire. Like that's how we got down. You know what I mean? And I'm really thankful for the bonding experience that I had with my cousin, who I also just saw yesterday at the Vintage Fest we were at selling games and stuff. Really thankful to him. Shout out to my cousin Ryan. That covers Game Boy. What about you? I've been talking for a while. 4th generation. Give me some memories.
4th generation. That I will flat out say it. For pre-2000 gaming, I don't know why I kind of divide gaming into pre-2000 and post, but Sega Genesis is my console. Like as much as my gaming journey started off in the second, as much as the Nintendo was, like you said, the snowball that started rolling downhill, the Genesis is my console. If I fire up a retro console, it's going to be that one.
Genesis does what Nintendo don't. Okay.
Blast processing, people. Blast processing.
Oh god, the East Coast West Coast beef between Nintendo and Sega in the 90s. Talk about awesome memories, man. Just being like on Team Blue or Team Red. Oh, that's good shit.
Oh, all the advertisements, whether it was on TV or whether it was in magazines, with them just Sega, like from the moment they came out, just constantly throwing shit at Nintendo.
Nintendo just not caring.
Yeah, Nintendo's just going, we're Nintendo. What of it?
Yeah. No, I didn't have a choice. Like I alluded to earlier, I traded my NES for a Genesis, but I have such good memories. Let's rattle off each other's list. Give me a list of your Genesis games first.
Okay, so Sonic the Hedgehog is obvious. Love Forgotten Worlds. The Thunder Force series. There's a game, and I'm just thinking of it now, and I didn't write it down. It's like Last Defender or Last Guardian. It was close to a launch game, but it was a platforming game, but you're kind of a wizard. Elisa Dragoon, Toe Jam and Earl, Kid Chameleon. The monster amount of RPGs on this system. I know that the SNES is all, SNES lovers, and I love the SNES, but SNES partisans love to push the Super Nintendo as the 16-bit haven of RPGs, but I'm here to tell you, Phantasy Star 2, 3, and 4, Sword of Vermilion, Might and Magic 2 and 3, Shining in the Darkness, Shining Force, Fairy Tale Adventure, King's Bounty. If you want to bring the Sega CD into it, Dark Wizard, Shining Force 2, Shining Force 3. The 2 Lunar games, anything by Working Designs, to be honest. The Genesis was just an RPG lover's paradise.
Yeah. No, that's fair. Because you have what Secret of Mana, Chrono Trigger, Final Fantasy.
Super Mario RPG.
Okay, yeah, that counts. Like there's definitely like there's some heavyweights on the SNES that definitely were very popular, and I think that kind of overshadows the sheer amount. And again, Nintendo didn't have as big of a stranglehold on this generation versus Sega as in the previous generation. When you compare the NES to the Master System versus the SNES to the Genesis, it's like night and day. Like the Sega didn't have equal market share, but it was a contender. And like you said, there's a lot of stuff that may have went under the radar when people are looking back with the rose-tinted glasses. And you're right. My list, I put Sonic 2. That was my favorite. I owned that. It was like a handful of games that I owned. Phantasy Star 2 was the first RPG I ever played. Phantasy Star 4, I love that. Gunstar Heroes, talked about that last episode. Streets of Rage, Shinobi 3, NBA Jam, Mortal Kombat, Lion King, Aladdin, Gargoyles, Comic Zone, Echo the Dolphin, Earthworm Jim. I mean, just to go back and talk about one, and I'll trade back and forth with you. Phantasy Star 2 was my first RPG. Now, when I traded my Nintendo to my neighbor for his Sega Genesis, and he just did it because he was bored, I thought it was crazy. I was like, dude, I'm doubling up my graphics and you're cool with this? He was cool with it. So a poor kid got a leg up by being able to trade his old console for like the new hotness at the time. And I got Sonic 2 and a handful of other games, but Phantasy Star 2, it came within, he had the instruction booklet for it. And what was cool about Phantasy Star 2, you don't see this honestly at all. It was a thick booklet and it had every single map in the game.
Mm-hmm.
And he had already drawn lines to tell you like which teleporter took you to which floor and which spot. So eventually when I actually figured out how to use the maps, I was able to shoot through that game pretty quickly because I knew where all the treasure and like where all the directions were, which got me in the end game severely underleveled. But that's a lesson that I would have to learn at a later date. But when I first played it, I hated it. Up to that point, my understanding of games was push button, guy do thing. You know, it was action games. You know, you push button, Mario jump, push button, Link stab sword. So for me to push button, the delay, like attack, and then okay, and then the delay, and then the attack animation, and then you want to attack again? It just felt clunky and slow, and I was like, why is this fun? Why do people do this? This sucks. And I put it down for the longest time, and I only picked it back up, thank goodness, because I didn't have many options, and I got bored, and I was like, well, I can play Sonic 2 for the 50th time, or I can try this out again. And slowly but surely it started to work out in my brain that like, no, this is fun. You're commanding these people. You can level them up. You can gear them up with strong things. You can explore. You can develop the story. You can listen to that banging soundtrack. Are you kidding me? And it finally clicked with me like, wow, like this type of game is actually really neat. I didn't really get hooked into RPGs until the following generation with a particular game. But this definitely laid some decent groundwork where I would give the next generation of RPGs a chance. So super thankful to Phantasy Star 2 for that.
I'll put out a RPG. And yeah, Phantasy Star 2, I echo everything you said. It's a wonderful RPG. It's a wonderful RPG series. If I'm going to go though with an RPG series that just has memories for me, it would be Lunar on the Sega CD. Amazing soundtrack, took advantage of the Sega CD and the increased storage on the CD, so that it had these lush, beautiful symphonic soundtracks that sounded like nothing we had ever heard before on a console. Beautiful animation. The graphical fidelity of it wasn't perfect, but it still had a kind of a rudimentary anime feel to it.
And it had voice acting, right? Do they have voice acting in that version?
I think don't quote me on it. I think the voice acting was part of the director's cut that they did for PS1. PlayStation. Yeah.
That was my first experience of Lunar. So yeah, I didn't know if they had it back in the Sega CD, but that's great.
But my biggest memory of this, and I had already been huge in RPGs. By then I'd already played a couple of Phantasy Stars and all the games RPGs that I mentioned before, but my dad and I did not have the greatest relationship for a lot of reasons. Not going to go into it. Just there was a tenseness, and we didn't have a lot in common at all. For some reason, he came into the room when I started playing Lunar, and he got into the story. And that became a thing that we shared. So whenever I would go to my room to go play video games, he would go, "Hey, are you playing Lunar?" I'm like, and if I was, yeah, okay, I'll be there in 2 minutes. And he would come and he would sit on the bed and he would watch. And he would, he would look at the map and say, "No, I think you need to go into that cave," or "No, try, you need to heal. Your tank is running low on health points. You need to heal him." And he would help point out strategies and things that I was missing. And we would, quote unquote, play the game together. And that was, I don't have a whole lot of good memories with him, but that is one of them. And so that I'm thankful for that. They gave us something to bond over.
That's awesome. It's a really lovely story. I love that. Cool. I don't know if I have anything that powerful for the fourth generation, but it reminds me of something that happened with a good friend of mine later on. So I might actually jot that down and we'll talk about it later. It was more of a PC experience, and I know we don't cover PC as heavily on this show, but it was also on seventh generation consoles. So let me just jot that in my notes. Okay, I love that. I love that so much. I talked about Gunstar Heroes last episode, so just mirror that the different attack animations, the changes and shifts in gameplay, the quirkiness of it. Streets of Rage, also banging soundtrack, also a great beat 'em up. Shinobi, amazing soundtrack. Fun ninja gameplay. Not as hard as Ninja Gaiden, but I mean, it's a contender. NBA Jam, I mean, come on. Like, we've played arcadey sports games before and since, but NBA Jam is special just for like that announcer, every time you hit a shot and you hit another one in a row, he's heating up. And then if you hit 3 shots in a row, you're on fire. You got unlimited turbo and you just do insane, stupid dunks from like all the way up in the rafters. You know what I mean? Like, it was so bombastic. And then it's later iterations. There was an NBA Hang Time cab at my first job at Pizza Hut that I played all the time. That was basically a souped up version of NBA Jam. And I mean, I'm not super into sports games, but I think that taught me that, like, if presented a certain way, I can definitely hang with a sports game. So any other Genesis or fourth generation games you have memories tied to?
So actually, it is a sports game, and this is just this is another one of those kids inventing their own fun memories. But it was Madden 92, which is not my favorite sports game on the console. Actually, that would be Mutant League Football, which is just beautiful and stupid for just the fact that you can murder people playing football.
It's good stuff, yeah.
Yeah, but Madden 92, for all of you younger gamers, again, story time with the old guy. Back when Madden first started, there was no franchise mode. There wasn't a playoff mode. There was pick a team, play a game. That was it. Like, it was very rudimentary. Playbooks had 16 plays, maybe, 8 run, 8 pass.
Yeah, that was 16, very limited amount. You're right.
Yeah, it was very basic, but it was still fun. And I remember making my own season. And I got a piece of paper and I wrote down, I'm not paying attention to conferences or anything. So, I didn't follow what an NFL schedule would be, but I picked the team that I wanted to be, which was for no reason I can explain, the New Orleans Saints. And I picked 16 opponents. And then I created a playoff schedule, assuming that I beat them all. And I proceeded to find a run play that was just this simple. You could flip it, but it was just a halfback runs to the left of the center or to the right of the center. Like, the front line just kind of opens up a hole and it was pick one or the other. And I just repeated that play on loop every game. I almost never passed. I just did that play and got like between 6 and 9 yards every play.
Okay.
And I scored like 100 points a game. I mean, yeah, it's totally breaking the spirit of the game, but for some reason it was just damn fun.
Well,
and that was the first time I think I took a game and kind of made my own game within it.
That's what I was going to say. That's what I love about gaming. You can break the rules or play it how it's not intended and make it your own thing. And I can't think of any other medium where you have that much control over the experience. It's not like you can, I mean, I guess you could like chapter skip a movie and watch it out of order, I guess, or like flip through pages in a book, but it doesn't hit the same as like exploiting different holes and like how the game is supposed to be played versus what you can actually get away with. Not just to cheat necessarily, but also to get a different experience. I mean, in the spirit of that, say like a no kill run in Metal Gear, or like a charisma run in Fallout New Vegas or something. You know what I mean? Like just finding a different, interesting way to play, and then not the way it was intended, and just going through to see if you can do it.
Yep.
I love that so much. That's really cool. I'm glad you had that experience early on.
That's going to come up again in the next generation.
Of course it is. Speaking of the next generation, we're not going to get there just yet, but I think we should end with the 5th generation today and do a 2-parter because, and I was afraid of this, I think this episode is going to go really long otherwise, because
I would agree.
We're not even to the 5th and we're going all the way to the 8th, people. And I think we've been chatting for, just under an hour. So let's make it a 2-parter and make this 5th generation the last one. Before we move on, Echo the Dolphin is weird and a lot of people hate it. I really liked it. It was my personal Metroid because I never got a chance to play Super Metroid in its heyday. And there was puzzle solving and adventuring around the levels. And of course they had a password system because the game was actually kind of long, but there's a mystery behind it. You're a dolphin in the ocean, you're playing with your dolphin family, you're jumping in and out of the water. It actually like low key encourages you to jump in and out of the water to like test out Echo's abilities. And then once you jump too high, it triggers a cutscene where everything is just sucked out of the ocean into the sky, except for you. And you're like, what the hell? And the music gets ominous and the sea is empty and you're just left to like explore and figure out what happened. And it gets so nuts. I hate to do spoilers, but in this game, I feel like it's old enough for where it's fine. And it may even encourage people to check it out. You go, across the ocean into the deep sea. You eventually go back in time, like you're with like larger, scarier sea creatures. And you have to manage like your oxygen because you are a dolphin. So when you're in the deep sea, you have to find like air pockets and shit. Like it gets really in depth. And then eventually you go in outer space and fight an alien queen. Because, spoilers, aliens, it took all your family and they were just, a food source. So it gets nuts.
It does. Echo it's a weird game.
It is weird. And I can see why a lot of people don't like it because there are some clunky mechanics. And it's a little frustrating to control the dolphin in tight spaces and it can be very difficult. But if you're patient and you practice, it is not impossible to get through. In fact, nowadays with the glorious save states, I think that's, going to be a game changer for anybody who wants to get into it, experience it. But for me, it was a vibe. I just love the solitude and the explorative experience of being this dolphin and like trying to like just worm my way through this world that they crafted. So
yep.
Love it for that. Earthworm Jim, humor. I mean, one of the earliest games I can remember making me laugh, just doing irreverent, stupid shit. Comic Zone, really cool concept. Comic book artist gets sucked into his own comic by a villain he created. Now he has to like go through the panels and fight. There's, like different choices that you can make and items you can use. And you have to effectively manage your powers and your items to get to the end. It's very difficult, as a lot of games were in that era, but unique enough to where I think people should experience it if they haven't played it. And that is it, other than like an honorable mention for Mario Kart on the SNES. My friend had a SNES. We played a lot of Mario Kart. Mario Kart's amazing. Of course, that's going to be a great memory. And then Neo Geo. Again, I didn't have a Neo Geo, but we had a Neo Geo cab at my first job at Pizza Hut, and we played Bust a Move and Metal Slug all the time. It's great memories with those games as well. And that would wrap up 4th generation for me. You got anything else?
I do want to mention it was a great generation for shmups. Mm-hmm. Whether it was the Thunder Force series, which I mentioned before, especially Thunder Force 3, I think that one was the best. The Sega CD had some great shmups as well. Sylphied was this beautiful polygonal semi-3D kind of like Star Fox, but not running at 2 frames a second. So, sorry, Star Fox lovers, that game is brutal to watch. Like it's a cool concept, but it was
walked. We could run later.
Yeah, there was a reason why the 64 game is looked on so much more fondly than the original.
Yes.
So Sylphied, Solfease, or depending on the version you have, Soldice. I don't know why it got a rename, but just some fantastic shmups. Another platformer that I think kind of, even though Sega's re-released it on everything they ever re-release, I still think it doesn't get enough attention, which is Kid Chameleon. That game, okay, for one, it's got like 120 levels, but almost every level has a secret exit or 2 or 3, so you could skip 5, 10, 30 levels at a clip. So there's like dozens of ways to beat this game. But what also makes it fun is that there are probably, I think there's like a dozen different power-ups. You can be, one power-up is a rhino, one power-up is a samurai, one power-up you kind of look like a German Panzer tank, one power-up you look like Jason Voorhees. Just so many of them, and each one, you can carry them from world to world, and each one will help you problem solve how to get out of the level, but in a different way. So like one level might be better suited for the Panzer tank power up, but that won't stop you from using the rhino to get through it. But it just goes on and on. So it's the best type of platformer. It's very hearkening back to the classic Mario games, in that when you get a power up, it's not what do I need to use this for? It's how can I use it?
Yeah. No, I played a little bit of Kid Chameleon, but unfortunately I didn't play it in its hay, so it didn't stick with me. But I do respect the concept for sure, and the way that you describe it, like that's definitely the mark of a good game when you're given the tools to kind of get through the level how you want to. You know what I mean? And that way it provides a fresh gameplay experience when you want to experiment. So love that.
Oh, one more. I didn't take note about it, but it just popped in my head real quick. Fatal Labyrinth.
Okay, yeah.
Early version of a roguelike where you are this nameless hero that gets sent into this castle, and you're supposed. I can't even remember what the goal is. I don't remember. I think the town is dying, and there's something in the castle, a treasure maybe. Yeah. It's been a long time since I played it, but the idea of it is that every time you play it, there's 30 floors you got to get through, and the floor layout constantly changes, and the item layout constantly changes, and you have to maintain your hunger level. So there's elements of a roguelike, there's elements from Gauntlet. It is incredibly difficult. Like getting to that 30th level, you have to get the right run, find the right weapons at the right time, and exude a lot of patience. But it's really fun. I adore it. I go back to it every now and then. I think I've beaten it maybe once.
Yeah, really ahead of its time in a lot of ways. Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, let's move on to the 5th generation, and we'll end there, folks, for this episode. So the 5th generation, I feel like you and I are going to have a lot to say. So we'll see how long we go, and if we want to split that in half even. For me, I had, stuff to talk about in regards to the PS1 and the N64. I guess we could start with the N64 since that was neither of our main consoles, in case we have anything, quick to say about that. I had a buddy that had an N64, so I would go to his place to play it. We'd rent games. Again, Mario Kart, once again, right? Pilot Wing 64 was a really fun game that I enjoyed playing on that. Pokemon Stadium. It was just neat to be able to like see the Pokemon in 3D. Mystical Ninja starring Goemon, which I think I've talked about before on this show. I can't remember if I mentioned it last episode or not. I know I've talked about it on my older show. In fact, I had a short-lived side series on my older show called The Backlog. And the conceit was we all have a backlog, and it's hard for us to kind of, stay disciplined and actually kind of work through that backlog rather than play the next newest thing or, replay Elden Ring for like the 20th time, right? So with that, it was kind of like a audio podcast journal log where I would play through and then talk about my progress every week, right? Kind of encouraged me to play through it. In fact, I even did that with a friend in regards to Outriders. We did another episode of the backlog where me and a friend played Outriders together, and then we got on the show to talk about it together. So that was a really neat concept. But with Goemon, it was a rental where I stayed up all night to play it, and I couldn't quite beat it, but I fell in love with it instantly. The music, the quirky animations. It's a fun adventure style platformer in the vein of Super Mario 64, but a much more involved story. And you basically kind of trot all over Japan. It seems like kind of like an Edo period or like an ancient Japan era. And you're a ninja named Goemon. You got a friend named Ibisi Maru, and you got like a little robot that you find. And there's another ninja that joins your cause. And it's a vibe. It's a good time. But it was one of those N64 games that required a memory card, and they weren't really as ubiquitous as, say, memory cards were with PS1, where it was pretty much required with all the games that you had. So my friend didn't have a memory card, so I had to beat it in one shot and couldn't do it. Years later, my cousin had an N64 and a memory card, and this was like probably maybe 15 years ago. And I was like, I have a chance to beat it again. And I spent an entire Thanksgiving weekend trying to get through it when we weren't like hanging out or doing family stuff. Still couldn't get through it. A few years after that, I found a copy, but I don't have an N64. And it was right when the N64s like shot up in price, right? And only just recently, my buddy, again, Full Metal Merc, who runs a store, he was able to find an affordable N64 for me, and he sold it to me for cheap. And then I was finally actually able to play it. So years in the making, all the way as far back, I think, as like in the late 90s, I've been trying to finish this game and only recently finished it like within the last couple of years, which is wild to me. And I think that covers it for N64. I think I talked about it last week. Like I used to play a lot of 1080 and we would listen to Prodigy while we played it. Those were fun memories. But any N64 memories for you?
No, my experience with the N64 during its existence was limited to playing it at like the demo kiosk at a Babbage's.
Fair enough.
Never had it. Never knew anyone that had one.
R.I.P. Babbage's. R.I.P. Funko Land. R.I.P. EB Games Boutique. Trying to think
R.I.P. Software, etc.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of all the stores that just got absorbed by GameStop. Because they all turned into GameStops. It was wild all at once. Yep. Like, what the hell is happening? Okay, well, let's quickly share our PS1 lists, maybe get into a couple stories. And if we need to save a few for next time, we can launch into it because I know PS1 is going to be huge for you. I just know it.
Well, how about before we get to PS1, I had a Saturn.
Really? Okay, let's go.
So Saturn. So this will counterbalance the N64. So, having a Saturn, I was thankful for being able to experience one of probably gaming's more obscure libraries. I can think of one Saturn game that has seen re-release, being Knights. But
was Panzer Dragoon or was that on Saturn?
Yes, Panzer Dragoon started on Saturn.
I finished that on Switch. My friends didn't like it, but I enjoyed it because I used a rapid fire controller. I think that's what you need. But I liked it. I liked it a lot.
Yeah, I have the remake of it. It's pretty good.
Yeah.
But the Saturn, as maligned as it was still a fun console. It was kind of fun being the outsider of the video games for a little while. Shining the Holy Ark was a great RPG on there. Just took everything about the Shining series and just made it so much bigger. But my major memory of the Saturn is tied to my buddies at the time. I turned 18. I got a job, and I met this whole new circle of friends. And there was 3 of us. We were just the best of friends. We did everything together. And one of the buddies, Devin, also had a Saturn. So it was like the two, just 2 rare people finding each other. It was just that kismet moment of, you have a Saturn, you share my pain.
Misery loves company.
Right. You have to wait 4 months for a game too. It's beautiful. But there were 2 games that the 3 of us would play on the Saturn as a trio constantly. One was Fighters Megamix, which was a 3D fighter game that combined Virtua Fighter, Last Bronx, and what was the other one? I can't remember it off the top of my head. I would have to look it up. But there was like a whole bunch of 3D fighters on the Saturn, and it combined all of them. But then it also took characters from other Sega properties. So you got characters from Sonic the Fighters. You got, for some odd reason, there was a large teddy bear character in there. There was a cactus with a sombrero that was kind of like a precursor to Samba de Amigo. And the weirdest hidden character, the Daytona car.
Daytona is good to me.
Fighting with the Daytona car is an experience.
I bet. I've never seen this. This is crazy.
Oh, if you haven't seen it, look up footage of it on YouTube.
I'm going to as soon as we get done recording. I'm oh my God, I'm blown away by that.
It's fucking amazing. So what it does is it sits up on its rear bumper. Its rear wheels kind of stick out like feet, and its top wheels are its arms. Mm-hmm. And so when you punch, you see the wheels kind of extend out into air on, I don't know what car part. I mean, because that's not how cars work.
Yeah, maybe like impromptu hydraulics.
I guess. But it's hilarious. We would play that game just to play as the most ridiculous characters. So it would be like the ninja from Virtua Fighter versus the Daytona car.
Kagemaru. Don't ask me how I remember his name.
So that one was just delirious fun. We didn't take it seriously. We were never really competitive about it. We were just having fun with the dumb, like I said, playing as a Daytona car or a cactus or whatever. The other game, and this was what I referenced back when I was talking about Madden, was we played NBA Live 97. Mm-hmm. And so this was back when the NBA was ruled by Charles Barkley and Michael Jordan and Patrick Ewing and Karl Malone, and you just had super teams everywhere, except the Bulls were killing all of them.
Yeah.
And we didn't want competition. We wanted to be the baddest mofos on the planet. Mm. So it had a character creator. We created ourselves. It didn't cap any stats. So we, of course, made ourselves 99s and everything.
Of course.
Then we picked our rest of the teammates, and they were all-stars, of course. And then we would play a game. We turned off out of bounds. We turned off goaltending. We turned off fouls.
You basically turned it into NBA Jam again.
Pretty much. We turned off charging. We turned like everything that you could possibly turn off. We turned off. Our scores were routinely like 300-12.
Yikes! Wow.
And we would just pass the controller back and forth. It would be like, oh hey, look, Scottie Pippen's got the ball. Punch him. Wham!
Oh no!
Pippen goes down. We steal the ball. We go and dunk it. We do it again and again and again. And it was. We were 90s boys, 90s teenagers, just being assholes. We just wanted to be assholes. So we played basketball with no rules. And it was
arch rivals. Remember that? You could punch people in arch rivals too.
Oh, yes. I loved arch rivals.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's that's a core memory I have, just looking back and I've never been a multiplayer guy. I've pretty much, because I grew up as an only child, I never really had to share, so I never really had to play 2-player, but that era is my 2-player era. And that was a hell of a lot of fun to be able to do that.
Yeah, that actually reminds me of a game I failed to mention from the previous generation, Road Rash 2 on Genesis. We had a lot of neighborhood kids that would come over and hang out, and sometimes we play multiplayer, but a lot of time it was controller passing. And you just imagine like a tiny bedroom with kids packed around like a 12-inch CRT, and then like the person playing Road Rash hits a bump and the motorcycle like just goes up in the air. And from outside the room, you just hear a bunch of children go, "Oh!" Oh man, I loved gaming socially whenever I had the chance. I had a little sister who wasn't as big of a gamer. She dabbled in the 5th generation. In fact, I'm going to talk about that in a bit. But for the most part, it was just me in the 4th, and then me later on with friends here and there. And I know we're going to probably have a few more social gaming stories, because there's that point in your life where everybody has just as much free time as you. You don't have bills, spouses, significant others, kids, responsibilities, and man, those were the days. Yep. Now, again, not that I don't like the way I'm at now, and I definitely am glad I got here. But there's something special about that time when you're young and you're just like wasting time with your friends who also don't have anything to do. Good stuff. Well, I'm going to rattle off my PS1 short list real quick, and we'll get yours. And I think we'll suspensely cut it off there and then come back and zero in and talk about some of those games. And then we'll finish the 5th generation, the 6th, the 7th, and the 8th. And that'll be part 2 of our Thankful to Be Gamers Thanksgiving extravaganza. Gen 5 through 8. So
sounds like a good idea.
Yeah, here's my list. PS1, Final Fantasy 8 and 9, Metal Gear Solid, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater and Pro Skater 2, Chrono Cross, Resident Evil 1 and 3, Lunar Star Silver Story Complete, or is it Lunar Silver Story? Anyways, the
Silver Star Story.
Silver Star Story. There it is. There's a star in there somewhere. Hot Shots. Those are games that I have pretty positive memories tied to. What are yours? Go.
Metal Gear Solid, Castlevania Symphony of the Night, Tecmo's Deception, Colony Wars, Monster Rancher 1 and 2. I just had one. The pro wrestling games, Monday Night Raw, WCW Nitro, ECW Anarchy Rules, because wrestling was big back then.
Oh, yeah.
Those are probably the ones. Yeah, that's it.
Cool. Well, look forward to us diving into that and the remaining generations in our list on the next episode, folks. This was fun. I'm glad we decided to do this.
Yes, it's nostalgia is a hell of a drug to take.
Yeah, it is.
It's a fun drug to take, and just all the memories that have been flooding back.
It's good stuff, for sure, for sure.
Warming the heart.
Well, we hope you guys enjoy it out there. If there's any games or stories that really speak to you or make you feel thankful to be a gamer, don't be afraid to share them. Maybe we'll put them on part 2. You have our email in the show notes. We got our link tree in the show notes. Reach out to us. We would love to hear from you and hear what you think. I want to give a special shout out to everybody I met yesterday at the Totally Rad Vintage Fest in the Indiana State Fairgrounds. We sold a lot of cool vintage gamer goodies, and I passed out a lot of cards to folks to check out the show. So I hope that there are people listening from that event that decided to check us out. And if you did, thanks for stopping by. We'd love to hear from you.
Absolutely. We want this to be as fan, listener, interactive as possible. Tell us, like Michael said, give us your memories. Tell us why our memories suck. Tell us why our memories are amazing. Whatever. Just write in, contact us on social media, Our all of our social media and contact info is in the link tree. Love to hear from you on it.
Definitely. All right. Without further ado, I think that is the episode. So once again, thank you all for coming out to listen to us. We'll see you for part 2.
Until next time.
Take care.